Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm Sam Oliver. I've been with Zone & Co for 9 years now. I'm going to be taking you through the basics of Solution 7 and giving you an understanding for how we work and hopefully how we can help elevate your reporting team to give you those fresh reports straight from NetSuite. And give you the ability to refresh them at the click of a button. So this is going to kind of be two sides. We're going to start by going through a handful of slides just to give you an overarching view to Solution 7. And after that, we'll jump straight into Excel so you can see the product as it lives. So with that in mind, I'll start sharing my screen. You'll also see that there should be a Q&A chat box. So if you have any questions throughout this, just put them in there and we will address them towards the end of the session. Okay. So I'm hoping you guys can see my screen now. So Solution 7 is an Excel reporting tool for NetSuite. You'll see at the bottom we have a handful of badges here. I'm not going to walk through all of them today, but the kind of two key ones are this Suite Cloud Developer Network Partner and this Built for NetSuite verification. Now, we've been a partner for over 12 years now, and we've also been Built for NetSuite verified for over 12 years. That Built for NetSuite verification simply means that before NetSuite releases a new version, we get access to that before you guys, and it gives us time to test against that new version, iron out any potential issues before it hits your door. So we constantly develop as NetSuite develops. Now, Solution 7 itself, it lives within Excel and it connects directly to NetSuite using something called the Suite Analytics Connect module, which you may or may not already have on your NetSuite instance. Now, the reason we use that is twofold. Firstly, from a data security standpoint, your data is only ever going to live within your NetSuite instance or your Excel. It never enters our infrastructure. The other benefit is it allows us to have a true live connection to NetSuite. So the second you post a new invoice, journal, bill, as soon as that's in NetSuite, you can jump back into your reports in Excel and refresh that Excel workbook. This orange arrow here signifies the data flow. So not only can you pull data from NetSuite into Excel, we can actually push budgets and forecasts directly from Excel back into NetSuite. So it gives you that full two-way connection. Now, why Solution 7? We have a lot of people come to us to solve different problems. Probably the most common one is the building of the reports from NetSuite. So what we see a lot of people doing before using Solution 7 is they'll be exporting multiple reports, sometimes 3, 4, maybe even 5 different reports from NetSuite. They'll then export them to Excel and stitch them together using VLOOKUP, SUMIFs, all those standard Excel functionalities that I'm sure you guys use day in, day out. That's all done to create a single report. Now, if your data changes in NetSuite or moves forward, so it could be month end or year end where things are changing a lot, you've almost got to go back to square one. You've got to go back to your NetSuite report and rerun those and export them back to Excel to update that report. This can cause delays in your reporting, can cause inconsistent formatting, and it's a very repetitive process. The other reason we get people coming to us is the difficulty of importing budget data. So I'm sure some of you will have had experience of the CSV upload for NetSuite, which can be, again, time consuming and is error prone. Now, we bypass all of that. So because we live in Excel, you can build your reports out in whatever format you want. You build them once and then you can refresh them as often as you need. Now, the other benefit of being in Excel is you can lay your reports out in whatever format you like. So for example, here we have a variance income statement. Now, this is typically 3 or 4 different NetSuite reports. One to bring in your current period, actual budget and variance. One to bring in your year-to-date, actual budget and variance. Another one for your full year budget, and another one for your last year to date. With Solution 7, we have custom Excel formulas that are pulling in these actuals and budgets directly from your live data in NetSuite. Now, these formulas are cell driven. So in this particular report, they are being driven by cell C3, which is currently February. So when it comes to my next reporting period, all I have to do is update C3 from February to March, and these actuals and budgets are all going to update to reflect that March period. The variances and the totals, that's all just standard Excel functionality. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. You have full access to those native Excel functionalities. Now, the other side of the coin is what we call Excel-based financial planning. So we've already mentioned the budget upload, which can be useful for getting your budgets back into NetSuite, but we have our automation, which is useful for creating and distributing your budget reports. So for example, here, I've got my departments down at the bottom. If I wanted to create a forecast for each of these different departments, rather than me having to create and maintain 5 different forecast reports, what I can do is I can build a forecast template in Excel using Solution 7, and then use our automation engine to take that template and generate it for each of my different locations, or in this case, departments. It can also distribute them at the same time, so it can take that template, generate the reports, and actually email them out to the relevant stakeholders. Once those forecasts have been finalized, you can take these numbers and push them directly back into NetSuite, all without leaving Excel. Once you have those numbers in NetSuite, you can start reporting on them. So this here is a rolling forecast report. Like the last report I showed you, it's being driven by the period, which is currently in February. So when it comes to March, I simply change B4 from February to March. The column G, which is currently looking at a forecast, will flip over to be an actual, and again, your report's then good to go. If you want to amend those forecasts and upload those to NetSuite, you can do that directly in this report. You can also upload a 3+9, again, all without leaving Excel. Now, the key thing about Solution 7 is it is super lightweight. So it's super easy to implement. You can see there it's a 1-hour implementation. In that hour, we install the software, we configure it, and we actually do a little bit of training all at the same time. Because of the ease of use and how quick it is to set up, we typically see on average over 2 days saved on month-end close. And we've had plenty of happy customers who can verify that. We're now going to jump into Excel itself so I can show you how the software works and give you an idea for how you can elevate your reporting. So if I bring over an Excel workbook, what you will see is along the top, we have Solution 7, and this is where all of our functionality lives. So when it comes to building and refreshing reports, you don't need to be anywhere else. Now, the key parts for building your reports are these lists and functions up here. So the lists allow us to build the shape of our reports, the dimensions we want down the side, across the top, any filters we might want in the corner. The functions are then how we can start bringing back our numbers from NetSuite. Now, we have a wide range of different function categories. We're not going to be going through all of these today, but essentially they boil down to 2 different types. You've got balance functions for reporting on your actuals, and you've got budgets for reporting on your budgets and forecasts. We're going to start on our actuals today. We're going to take this top formula here, which is reporting by account number. And what you'll see is we get a dialog screen. This is just to help us pick and choose what we want to report on. So starting with the subsidiary, I can use this lookup button here to choose from my available subsidiaries in NetSuite. I'm just going to take the consolidated. We could do the same on account. So if I do a lookup here, you can see I have my full chart of accounts where I can pick and choose from. I'm going to go ahead and choose a revenue account. So I'm taking this 4,000 code here. The last thing we need is a period. So I'm going to do a lookup on the from period. And you can see here, I've got all of my accounting periods. And I'm going to scroll down to January 23. Now that's the minimum we need to start bringing numbers back. The rest of these parameters are optional. So we have a 2 period here. This is for reporting on, for example, a year to date, where you'd set the from period to January or whenever your financial year starts, and your 2 period to your reporting period. We then have class, department, and location, which are your NetSuite segments. And then we've got parent currency. So this is used for reporting in different currency subsidiary contexts. I'm going to keep it simple for today though. I'm just going to press OK, and it's actually already been back to NetSuite to grab a figure. Now it has come back as a negative, and that's because we're looking at revenue. So I'm going to simply flip the symbols over by sticking a minus sign in front of my formula bar. At this point, it's just an Excel number. So any formatting I want to do to this, I can do using my standard Excel functionality. To start making this a bit more dynamic, I can start using cell references. So if I key in my account code in B3, I can go back to my formula and you'll see it's just an Excel formula. So if I remove my hard-coded value and reference cell B2, oops, let's try that again. What I can now do is I can change this account code and you'll see the value updates as I go. From this, we can start building up mini statements. So if I type in my revenue codes, what I can then do is I can drag this down to give me my movement for January. If I want to see my total underneath this, you'll never guess what we do here. We simply use the Excel sum formula. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel. Now, there's going to be some reports you build, such as your balance sheet, where you might not necessarily want each of your individual revenue codes on that report. You might just want to see total revenue on a single line. Well, to do that, we have our wildcards. So if I key in 4*, that is a wildcard saying, give me every account that begins with the number 4, which for me are my revenue codes. So if I copy this formula down, you'll see that these two match up. The only difference is one is summing up cells on an Excel workbook. The other one is pulling directly from NetSuite. Now that's kind of the core functionality for those functions there. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to use the lists with those functions to build up a basic report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my revenue codes down the side. I'm going to have my periods across the top, and I'm going to have a subsidiary filter. So starting with my revenue codes, I'm going to be using this column list. Now our lists, like our functions, have different categories. So we've got accounting for account names, numbers, currencies, accounting books, things like that. Classifications are your NetSuite segments, and relationships are your customers, projects, vendors, all of those different entities that you may have in NetSuite. So each of these different lists can be reported on in one way or another using our various functions. We're going to keep it simple today. We're going to bring back a list of accounts by number. Again, we get a dialog just like our functions. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a subsidiary. And I'm actually going to use that wildcard again now. So if I type in 4* and press OK, that's going to run back to NetSuite and bring back my account codes. So you'll see we've got our account numbers and account names. And the great thing about these lists is they are connected to NetSuite. So if I was to add in a new account code now, say account 4005, rather than me having to go into all of my templates and add that new account in, I can simply refresh in the top left and any new account code will be added to this list. I'm then going to use the pop-up list to bring back my subsidiaries. Again, I get a dialog here. For this particular one, I'm going to leave them all blank and just press OK. Now, because I've chosen to do a pop-up list, I get a drop down here where I can then switch between my different subsidiaries. So once I've built up this kind of view, I can easily switch between my different subsidiaries to get different values. The last thing I want is I want my periods across the top. I don't actually have a Solution 7 list for that, but I'm simply going to use 3 Excel formulas. So I'm going to use the date formula to bring back the first day of my financial year, which for me is January the 1st. I'm then going to use the text formula to take that date and format it to match my period names in NetSuite, which for me is this 3Ms and 4Y format. I'm then going to use the eDate formula to take that start date and add 1 month, which will give me February. So if I do a quick format paste here, oops, done that wrong. Let's just undo that. And that gives me February. I can then take both of these and drag them across, and that gives me my full year periods. Now, ultimately, we're just using Excel here, so it doesn't matter how you build these up, as long as the end result is your period names across the top match what you have in NetSuite. At this point, I now have the shape of my report, so I need to start bringing back my numbers. So we're going to use that function again, but this time, rather than using the lookups, I'm actually just going to take everything directly from Excel. And you can see I'm just locking these cells in place. Again, it's negative because we're looking at NetSuite. So, looking at revenue codes, which is stored as a credit. So let's flip those over and apply my formatting. I can then drag that across and drag it down, and I have my full year. I can then add totals into this by simply using the Excel sum formula again. And I can go ahead and start adding formatting to this. So I could add company logos, graphs and charts by simply using the Excel graph and chart builder. But rather than me show you how to do that, I'm just going to bring through one that I've actually built earlier. So this is kind of the polished version of that report. So you can see it's the exact same thing, it's just using different formats. What you'll see is my graphs and charts are simply referencing the cells. And because of the way we've built this, if I now switch over to a different subsidiary, you'll see that as the numbers update, so do the graphs and charts. So again, let's switch over to US. You'll see my graphs and charts update as we go. Now I'm going to switch back to my consolidation, and what I'm going to show you is how we can now take this kind of summary view and get down to the underlying information. So taking this 2.1 million here, I'm currently looking at my consolidated subsidiary. I now want to see, well, which of my subsidiaries make up that figure. To do this, I can simply right click on the cell where I get the drill down menu, and I can start breaking down by different segments. So if I go ahead and take subsidiary to begin with, you'll see I get a breakdown of the different subsidiaries that make up that 2.1 million. Crucially, what's happening here is we're using the exchange rates in NetSuite to work out what the US dollar amount is, which is our consolidated currency, for the European and Mexican subsidiaries. I can keep drilling from here. So taking this 1.3 million, I can go ahead and drill down by location. And I can actually drill all the way down to the transaction detail. Now, what this gives me is a line-by-line breakdown of each transaction that makes up that amount. You'll see we've got our additional segments there, as well as our relevant entity. On the left-hand side here, we have a hyperlink, and that takes you back to the source transaction in NetSuite. So it can go from your live data in NetSuite into Excel for your report. You can then drill down to analyze those numbers and actually take it back to the source. As we've been drilling down, you can see additional sheets have been created. I'm sure you can imagine if you've done that on several cells, it's going to quickly fill up your workbook. So to clean things up, we're going to use this delete drill down button to take us back to our summary report. So that's one way to get to the underlying transaction detail. The other way we can do this is by using our pivot table functionality. So if I open up a new sheet, what you'll see is we've got two different types of pivot table. We've got a regular one and we've got our flattened. Starting with the regular Excel pivot table, we have 5 different categories. We've got budgets for our budget and forecast information. We've got inventory snapshot for the current state of any inventory items. We've got transactions age, that's for your AR and AP aging detail reports. And then we've got our non-posting and posted transactions. So we're going to take the posted transactions today. And again, we get a dialog just like our lists and just like our functions. From here, I'm going to go ahead and populate this with similar information. So I'm going to take my consolidated subsidiary. I'm going to do my revenue codes, and I'm going to do January to December 2023. If I press OK here, that's going to run a query back to NetSuite, and it's going to bring that information back into an Excel pivot table for me to use. At this point, it is just an Excel pivot, so I can go ahead and apply my values. Again, because it's an Excel pivot table, if I want to see the underlying numbers, I can double click on this to get to the details. But the power behind the pivot table comes in the right click menu. So if I right click on this, I've got Solution 7 table, and I can do a number of things here. I can edit the table, which allows me to change my query parameters. So if I want to look at a different account range or a different period range, I can do that here. I can also refresh the table. So if I've added in any new transactions to NetSuite, I can refresh it to bring them back into the pivot. And we've then got choose columns, and this allows us to start bringing back additional information from NetSuite. So on the left-hand side, we've got our transaction line level. So here we can get our different amounts. If I scroll further down, I'm going to go ahead and grab the quantity in this example. If I then go to the bottom, we've got more information where we can start getting into additional tables. So you can get into your transaction header, you can get into your customers, vendors. In my case, I'm going to expand the items where I get the item fields. I'm going to go ahead and grab the item full name. I'm going to do the same for location as well. So let's grab the full name of that. And if I press OK, again, that's running that query back to NetSuite. And those additional fields will appear on the right-hand side here for me to then drag in. So if I switch off my original fields, I can now see my item, and I want to see the quantity of them. And let's break it down by location as well. So I get a breakdown of those. Or again, I can move that under item to give me a different view. Again, if I double click on this, we have the original set of fields and we have those original ones, those additional ones there now. So that's our first kind of pivot table. The next kind of pivot I'm going to show you is our flattened pivot table. And that works pretty much in the exact same way. So we've got those same 5 categories. If I take the transactions posted, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that subsidiary. I'm going to pop in my revenue codes. And again, I'm going to do January through to December, which will give me that full year. Now, because we've chosen the flattened pivot table this time, rather than giving us that standard pivot table kind of view, this will give us a line-by-line breakdown of each of our transactions there. So this might be used for a reconciliation or for an audit, so you can bring that information through. Again, I can right-click on this to edit the table, refresh the table, and again, I can go to choose columns to bring back additional information into this, this view there. So we're going to change gear now, and we're going to have a look at the budgeting and forecasting piece. And there's 2 things we're going to look at. We're going to look at the automation, and we're then going to look at actually pushing budgets back into NetSuite. So starting with the automation, what I have here is I have a budget template that I've created previously. Now, what we've got in column E is I have my prior year actuals, and that's been brought back using that Solution 7 formula that we looked at earlier. For my budget values, I'm simply taking my prior year actuals, dividing it by 12 and timesing it by 1.03 to show some growth. Now, ultimately, you can apply whatever functionality or logic you want at this point because it's just Excel. So you could leave these blank and send them out to various departmental stakeholders to review those numbers and fill them in themselves, or you can apply Excel logic to calculate what you'd expect the budget or forecast to be for the next year. Now, this is being filtered by my locations, which we've got at the top here. So I've got 5 different locations. And what I want is I want to build this report for each of those different locations. And to do that, we have our Solution 7 automation. So when I click Define Automation, it will create this automation control sheet. And there's a few things going on here. So firstly, in column A, I have my automation values, which are the same locations I just shown you. What they're going to be doing is when we run the automation is this is going to create an Excel worksheet for each of these different values. In column B, we then have our workbook names. So when I run this automation, it's going to create 2 workbooks. The first one, San Francisco, will have the first 4 locations in, and the Boston one will have my 2 Boston in. In column B, we've got our email address, and this is your distribution list. So at the moment, we're just sending it to one person, to myself. We can add additional addresses in by simply adding in a comma and typing in the next email address that we want to use. We can also separate these. So at the moment, I'm going to receive both of these workbooks. But if I wanted to send San Francisco to myself and Boston to a colleague, I can do that by typing in their email into this address next to it. Finally, in column D and E, we have our tokens. Now, what a token is it's an easy way to rename your worksheets and to give them pretty names. So at the moment, I've got this funky little 1 there. That's our token placeholder. When I run the automation, what it will do is it's going to take those tokens, and for each of the different values, it's going to put those into the sheet name there. So again, it's going to nicely rename them for us so that we don't have a workbook just filled of sheet one copy, sheet one copy two. So it's just a nice way to do that. Now, when it comes to running the automation, we have three options. We've got the print sheets, and that's to physically print the worksheets out. We've got save sheets. What that will do is that will create a copy and save them locally or on a shared drive. And we've got email sheets. That will send the email out, well, generate the sheets and email them out to the relevant stakeholders. Once you've gone ahead and created that, what you'll see the output gives you is a workbook like this. So you'll see I have a sheet for each of my different locations, and you can see the values change as well as I go through that. And that's because it's placed that value into the cell and it's switched it up for us. Now, this automation can also be used for your actual reporting. So again, if you've got a P&L and you want to create that for each of these locations, rather than me creating that P&L for each different location, I can create a P&L template and then use that automation to generate and distribute those out. Now, once you've got this built, the next step is to actually upload that to NetSuite. And to do this, what we do is we go to Budgets and Forecasts and we click Map Worksheet. What we're doing here is we're just telling Solution 7 where the values live. So the subsidiaries live in G4, our periods live across the top in row 7, we have our accounts down in column B, and we've got our budget category in B5. Now, for those who don't know, the budget category is how you can store multiple budgets within NetSuite. So you can have a budget, a forecast, a Q2, Q3, Q4 reforecast, and you can store them all separately so you can report on them again separately in different reports. We then have our optional fields and segments. There are classes, departments, locations, which you can see we're using, and our customers, projects, and items. Now, once you've got that defined, it's a simple matter of going to Budgets and Forecasts and clicking Upload to NetSuite. What we're doing here is we're then telling Solution 7 which budgets we want to upload. So I can do all of them, I can do one of them, or any combination of those. Once you've selected the values you want to upload, we click the Upload button, and that's then going to connect to NetSuite to push these in. Now, this uses the Suite Talk API to upload the budgets there, so it does take a little bit longer. But once that's uploaded, it's going to give us a summary sheet to show us what's been uploaded, where it's been impacted. And it'll also tell us if there's been any errors. So if there's any problems actually uploading those budgets, we will see that in the summary sheet, which is just coming through now. So there we have it. We have our 3 sheets that have been uploaded. We can see that there are 12 values in total, 12 records in total. It's taken 28 seconds. And down here, we actually have a hyperlink, and that takes you back to the NetSuite web services where you can start reviewing what's been uploaded and use it almost as an audit there. So that's how we can push our budgets and forecasts in. Now, again, because we're using that Suite Analytics Connect module, as soon as you've uploaded those budgets, you can pull them back down. So you can go ahead and start reporting on them and building things like your budget versus actual, your variance reporting, or that rolling forecast report that I showed you earlier. Now, that's kind of the key features of Solution 7 today. I did want to save some time at the end to go over any questions that may have come in. So I want to pass back to my colleague Katie, who's here, who's hopefully managing the Q&A box for us.
Yeah. Hi, Sam. We've had a number of questions come through, mostly during that initial part of the demo. Excuse me if you can hear my dog down here. The first question we had was around data. So, obviously you are talking about the NetSuite connection, but can someone also connect to non-financial data like timesheets, or is that not really part of the function?
So Solution 7 reports on financial data. So timesheets at the moment aren't supported in Solution 7. But what you can do, if you can get that information out into Excel, you can then use that alongside your live financial data to make any analysis that you need to.
Great. Let's see, what's the next one here? I think you might have showed a little bit of this once you were going fully down to those drill downs, but for sales, is there a way to pull in the number of sales transactions during a specific period?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's where our pivot tables would come into play. So what you could do with that, if I can find my pivot table, is you could do something like this. So I've got my periods. So if I go ahead and bring my months down here, I can then go ahead and bring in my transaction reference. And that's going to give me a count of those transactions down there. So that's how you can build up something like that, by using the pivot tables.
Perfect. All right, this one is a bit longer. So if we've got an alternative management GL hierarchy, can we use that and with the NetSuite data? So for example, a cost account in NetSuite, which they view as part of net revenue, but seeing it in the management P&L.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, if I go back into one of my earlier templates, so I showed you the wildcard earlier, but what I didn't show you was our arrays. So our arrays allow us to start bringing back different account codes in whatever grouping we want. So for example, if I wanted to bring back just 4002 and 4004, I can enter this curly parenthesis and I can then type in those account codes. If I then copy my formula down, that's going to give me those two accounts together. But you can do that for any that aren't next to each other. So if I wanted to bring back 4002 and 5000, again, that's going to give me the total for those two. And you can create those groupings. You can then, because you're just in Excel, you can create whatever label you want. And then if you want to hide what you've got there, you can just hide the cell, again, using standard Excel. So yes, absolutely, you can group them in whatever format you want using Excel alongside Solution 7.
Great. And another kind of related question. So in this case, multiple countries, different currencies, but hoping to look different currencies needed by department, looking to consolidate that into a global report and look at it, with the different currencies.
Yeah, so that is where this parameter of parent currency comes into play. So if I was reporting on, say, my Mexican subsidiary, I could go ahead and use the parent currency to go ahead and choose the global subsidiary, and that will use your exchange rates in NetSuite to display that in the global subsidiary currency. So you could have one row, one column with your local currency, and next to that you could have your global currency next to it. And again, you can do that by departments using that automation, or by building up using the lists and the functions. So yes, absolutely, you can do that.
Great. Questions are flying now. So let's see here. Customized fields. So custom fields in NetSuite, how do those show up? Or, how do we access those within Solution 7?
Yeah, so we would need to do a slight customization on our end to make them appear. So custom fields and custom segments can be brought through as lists. Specifically, custom segments would turn up in the classifications. And what we would do is you would have a custom parameter here for that custom segment. Equally, they can be brought through into that pivot table view we were just looking at. So if I go back into here, we could expose them on the choose column screen. So for example, in the transaction line, if I had a custom field somewhere here, we could expose that for you to bring through into that pivot table. Yeah.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about saved searches. So in this case, there are a number of reports. We have run reports in Excel by generating a number of saved searches in NetSuite that they then kind of stitch together. Is there a way that they could utilize some of those saved searches and, and pull them together by having the data, flow directly in from NetSuite rather than exporting them?
Yeah, so what Solution 7 won't do is it won't pull in those saved searches from NetSuite into Excel. However, you can do one of several things. Firstly, you could take the end report you've got and then insert the Solution 7 functions to reference that predefined template you've got. You could export the saved search, use that as a starting point to then actually reference them, or you can build it up from scratch using Solution 7. It might be a bit of a timely exercise, but once you've done it once, you don't have to do it again. You can then just refresh that time and time again. But what we quite often see people starting out with Solution 7 will take their end reports that they're already building, use the Solution 7 functions in that report because it's already in Excel, and simply link it up to the relevant cells. So yeah, while it won't pull it directly into NetSuite, into Solution 7, you can kind of get around it in a couple of different ways.
Great. Let's go back a little bit to the budgeting side of things. Does Solution 7 just really handle P&L, or are there options and functionality for budget sheet or balance sheet and cash flow as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We can handle both of those. So balances, again, it's the exact same formula. So if we go back into here, what we do, rather than just using a from period, you would set the from period to the beginning of time. So in my case, I think it's Jan 2001, and your to period would be your reporting period. So if I do Jan 2023, that will give me the balance for that account as of January 2023. But yeah, absolutely. Balance sheet is bread and butter to us. Same for cash flow. Everyone does cash flow slightly differently. So what you would do is, you'd find the bits that build up your cash flow, use the formulas to bring those in, and then use Excel to leverage that into the cash flow that you need.
Great. Okay, so we're making our way through here, Sam. Let's see. Can you combine specific GL accounts / arrays with specific classifications / arrays?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, if I go into this one, for example, so if I wanted, oops, wrong one. Let's take this one. If I wanted to do an array of, sorry, that's the wrong one again. If I wanted to do an array of my locations, I can control and click, and that will build up the array for me. And you'll see that's going to all update to reflect that. If I then wanted an array of accounts to reference that, I can go ahead and type in my array again, and that's going to give me the movement for that combination of, in this case, it's locations, but again, it's a classification and an array of those accounts. So yes, absolutely. Some good questions today.
All right, I think we're down to our last two. So for anybody who has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If we don't get to them, we will follow up after this session with any outstanding answers. But with that, let's see. Going back to other financial data, Sam, if we're using the Zone Payroll add-on, can we connect to Zone Payroll data?
That is a good question. I'm going to have to take that one offline and come back to you on that. I'm not sure to what extent it's supported at this point in time, but let me come back to you on that one.
Okay, perfect. And I think our last question that I see here is licensing. How do licenses work? Do I need both S7 and NetSuite? And then what about NetSuite permissions? Do people have to have a NetSuite license to view Solution 7 reports?
Yeah, so first off, the licensing is concurrent, so it's to do with the number of active users you have versus seated users. So you could insert, let's say you had 3 concurrent licenses, you could install the software on as many computers as you want, but you could only have 3 people active at any one time. You will need a NetSuite license because we are pulling straight from NetSuite, and the role you would need to use is just your NetSuite role. So if you've got any restrictions on that role, so for example, if you've got lots of subsidiaries and you want to restrict who can see which subsidiaries, you would apply that within the NetSuite role within NetSuite, and Solution 7 honors those permissions. Again, we're just pulling back directly from NetSuite. So whatever, if they can't see it in NetSuite, they can't see it in Solution 7.
Great. And I think that will do it on the questions for right now. Like I said, if you're putting any in right now, we will be sure to get back to you with any answers there. But Sam, that I believe is all we've got. I'm going to launch a survey to everybody. We would really appreciate your feedback as we build out our webinar program. We'd love to hear from you what you thought, what other topics you would like to see from us in the future. But for right now, thank you so much, Sam, for taking all of those questions and rapid fire at the end. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right, everybody, have a great day.